But let's turn to another subject, which also might get you just as fired up as the Insulate Britain demonstrations. We're going to be talking about the university lecturer who says she is being bullied by the trans community for daring to say, let me know what you think about this. She said that many trans women are still males. And for saying that, there have been calls for her to be sacked. She's been getting abusive messages from people very, very angry over this. Is she right in what she said, or is this really an attack on the trans community? As I said, it's led to many, many people demanding that she be sacked. Let's speak to Kellie-Jay Keen. She's the founder of Standing for Women. Kellie-Jay, what did you make of her comments? Was it offensive?
God, absolutely not. I think Kathleen Stock has been incredibly reasonable. She's written a well-researched book that looks at both sides of the debate. Personally, I disagree with Kathleen because I don't think she goes far enough on the side of women. But her right to express that is completely legitimate and lawful and should be expected in the university.
Well, the police are actually investigating whether indeed there is any form of victim harassment in terms of towards this Kathleen Stock, this university professor. Why do you think that such a subject, such as transgender, evokes such passionate response from that community?
I would say that the vocal part of that community, if that person is, if that community is actually a community, but the vocal element are dogmatic and very religious in their response. It's kind of like they're involved in a cult. And so if you question the fundamental premises of that cult, then they will be incredibly emotional and irrational in their response. And they haven't just objected to what Kathleen said, they have bullied her. They have put posters all at the university asking for her to be sacked. They called her hateful names. They've said she's transphobic. There is an Instagram group with about 600 followers. I last looked, I would imagine it's more now. And it is really victimising and bullying Kathleen Stock, and it's disgusting.
I mean, Kellie-Jay, some from that community could argue that actually when it comes to the trans community, that they've been marginalised for so many years, marginalised, faced severe discrimination, and their worry and concern is that the moment who they are is undermined, it could take them right back to those days. Is that a fair point?
I don't think so. I think there is an entitlement and a demand that the way they see themselves, everybody else adheres to and capitulates. And I think it's perfectly reasonable that women right across the country have had enough of that. There's a hashtag on Twitter today, hashtag Hear Me Roar, where other groups, my own group, have protested against the erasure of women. At no point did we victimise, harass, or target individuals. And so I think the trans rights argument comes down to this. They demand that everybody else sees them as they see themselves. They demand compelled speech, and they demand for men to be able to enter women's spaces. That seems to be the be-all and end-all of the demands of the trans community.
Kellie-Jay, what's your worry and concern then when it comes to women's rights in all of this, as in those who haven't transitioned to become women?
Well, I would fundamentally disagree with the idea that anyone can transition into being a woman. I think you're either born female or you're not.
See, this is something the trans community would take great offence to.
Yeah, they might, but I think it's quite offensive to women to say that you can transition into something that is a material fact. When men demand that we see them as women, women lose the right to use our own language. We use the right to use our own spaces without men. We lose the right to have domestic violence shelters without men, refuges without men, hospitals without men, prisons without men, and even our school changing rooms and girl guides camps without men. So what women are at stake to lose is absolutely enormous, and we are 51% of the population. There are more women in this country that have been victims of sexual assault than there are people identifying as trans, and I'd like to see those women discussed far more.
So, Professor Kathleen Stock, in her saying that many trans women are still males, you don't see this as transphobic?
No, I mean, I would go further. I would say trans women are still men. I wouldn't use loose terms like male. I would stick to men. But Kathleen Stock has really tried to be excruciatingly reasonable, really reasonable. And she has a rational and reasoned book. And for anyone to take offence to the point that they are trying to get a woman from losing her livelihood is really quite despicable.
So, what do you consider transphobic? What would you say is transphobic? Because clearly, many of the type of comments, of writings that people in the trans community do consider as hateful, if you like, you don't agree with that. So where do you think it starts?
I think probably many years ago, I think there were some men that were maybe also homosexual but called themselves transvestites, if we use old terms. I would say those men being attacked in the street were homophobic attacks that you could call transphobic if you wanted to redefine what those attacks were. And so I do think violence against anybody is absolutely not acceptable in a progressive and tolerant society. But transphobia nowadays means I don't believe that men can become women, and then that somehow makes me be accused of being hateful and transphobic. So at the moment, transphobia simply means I don't agree to go along with your dogmatic and quasi-religious fundamental ideas that men can become women.
So this is honestly a discussion that I have with my teenage daughter a lot, because I'm learning something new here in terms of how people like to be known, to be seen, to be referred to, and she has to sometimes sit me down and let me know the right way to deal with things and approach things and understand how offensive things can be. I might not see it as offensive, I might not necessarily agree, but I must respect the views of other people. So my question to you, Kellie-Jay, is it not right for us to maybe listen? I'm a black woman, and if anybody who wasn't from my ethnic group came and told me what I should find acceptable, we would have words. Do you know what I mean? I'm saying this is, you don't use the N word. You might think it's like, to give you an example, that's a bit of extreme. Let me give you something. If I'm saying that this is the way I want to be seen, I'm African British, say, and that's how I want to be seen, and somebody's going to come and sit down and tell me, actually, no, this is what you're going to be called. I could take offence to that. So surely we must see things from their point of view, is my point.
Well, if we use you as an example and myself, if I said that I was a black woman and I could talk as a black woman, I think both of us would find that pretty damn offensive and just an unreasonable thing for me to say.
But that's not necessarily exactly the point. I am black, and as a black person, this is how I would like things viewed in this. I could have a very different opinion to another black individual, but you are white, and this is how you would want to be seen as a white person, and I must respect that regardless of what I think. No? Do you see where I'm going?
Absolutely, 100%. But likewise, I think men are men, and I think I'm a woman. So I think I'm a much better place to decide who is allowed to call themselves women. And that's the point I'm making about the racial difference between you and I. It's not to suggest that I would think that was an at all reasonable thing to say, but it is a comparable, it's a comparison. So often when so-called trans rights activists talk about women, they will say black women and trans women are also women, as if anybody's ever thought a black woman wasn't a woman.
Really? These things that are said. Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a theme of racism that flows through all of this. If you talk to women in the United States of America, black women in the United States of America who are feminists, who are fighting against this, they seem to see trans rights activism as another thread of white supremacy. And I can definitely see their point.
Out of interest, do you face any abuse at all for your views?
Yeah, they've shared pictures of my kids. They've told
Oh,
people where I live. They try and seek out how I make my living, how my husband makes his living. Um, yeah, they've been relentless. They've told everyone which schools my kids go to. I've been reported to the police for saying that I don't believe that women have penises. So, yeah, the attacks are relentless, but women are losing their jobs. I mean, what's happening to Kathleen Stock is a prime example of the way that these men's rights activists will actually treat women who dare to speak out. And it's no mistake that they don't do the same to men. Men that speak up and say, I recognize men as men, they don't get remotely the same treatment as any woman. It's a thoroughly misogynist cult.
okay. Kellie-Jay Keen, founder of Standing for Women. Good talking to you.